Now, in case you have an iPad and you want to practice using Adobe Illustrator on the iPad, this is the perfect project for it. You can start laying out all the shapes using the iPad and then move on to refine them later on the desktop. Now, most of the workflow I'm going to still do on the desktop because I know most users would prefer to work there. However, for those who prefer to use the iPad, I'm going to show you a couple of useful techniques in this video. If you're not planning to use the iPad, you can just skip this completely and move on to the next lesson. Now, first thing what you need to do is still start on the desktop version because you will have to save a cloud document. That's the easiest way to then being able to open it on your iPad. So what you need to do is once you have the file open on your desktop, which in this case should be called Guy Start AI file, you just go to the file menu and choose Save As, and then here at the bottom you should have the Save Cloud Document option. Once you click on that, you just have to give it a name. I'm going to call it Guy Start, and then let's save it. And the way you can tell that this is now saved as a cloud document is that it shows a little cloud icon here in the document tab, but also the file format is now, instead of AI, it's AIC, so Illustrator Cloud. Now I switched over to the iPad now. I have an Apple Pencil in my hand. And first of all, I'm going to tap on Your Files here on the left side. And immediately, the most recently saved cloud document should show up there. So there's the Guy Start. I'm just going to select this. And it will download it first onto the iPad. So it might take a little bit longer than usually to open it. There we go. We have our layers the same way set up as on the desktop. So we have the sketch layer, which is set to multiply. That way we can see what we are doing even while we are drawing underneath it on the illustration layer. So I make sure that is selected here. One of the most important things to remember when you work on the iPad compared to the desktop is that you have limited options here. So it's a more streamlined workflow to quickly create shapes. And usually I would prefer to use the iPad for these type of more organic illustrations where I want to be a bit more artistic and less rigid or restricted with my lines. So this is a perfect style and project to experiment with the iPad if you haven't tried Illustrator on it yet. Now the drawing tools that we have available here are the pen tool. Then we have these additional drawing tools. If you tap and hold on them, you can choose the pencil, the blob brush, and the paintbrush. Then we also have the eraser, and that's pretty much it. So the most common tools we still have here that we wouldn't normally use on the desktop, maybe apart from the curvature tool. But I'm going to show you what I find the most effective way of working with the iPad and what I feel to be the most intuitive. So this is actually the blob brush tool. I'm going to select that. And I normally work with the basic round preset, which I selected here. Here at the bottom of the toolbar, we have additional options. So if you tap on the last icon at the bottom, you can adjust the angle, the roundness, and even options like whether you want to have the edges tapered or not. So by default, I'm just going to show you quickly, it's going to draw shapes like this. And of course, the thickness can be adjusted here. So I'm just going to drag that up so I can draw thicker lines like these. But as you can see, the beginning and end points are always tapered or they are shrinking in size. So that's something you can turn off here. If you uncheck that, now it's going to have the same thickness. But don't get confused, you can still use pen pressure when this feature is disabled. So I can draw in different pressure and vary the thickness of the brush. Of course, that's again something you can turn off if you don't want to use it. That's the pressure dynamics. Once you turn that off, it's going to be disabled. But whenever these features are turned on, there's even more options for them. So there's little arrows. If you tap on that, you can even adjust how the tapering you want to work, how long you want them to be, and you can also adjust the pressure dynamics. So that's also a setting for it there. So you can really customize this tool the way you prefer to work with it. And let's not forget also a very important setting, the smoothing, which is this icon here, just below the size. This is essentially how the pencil tool accuracy works on the desktop. So you can make it much more smoother, which means it will create less anchor points, but it won't be as accurate. or if you keep it lower, then it's going to look very similar to the way you are drawing. I like to keep this around 10, but I can show you if it's set to 1, which is the lowest value, I can draw and it's going to create much more anchor points. So if I select this, we can see how this looks. And compared to this, if I go back to the blob brush and I increase the smoothing all the way up, when I draw, one thing that you will notice that it's going to be a bit slower. So it's going to take time to render. That's because there's a smoothing going on, but you can compare the two. Generally, there's less anchor points, but to be honest, I like to keep the smoothing quite low, mainly because I don't want my lines to be delayed. So I am going to just delete all of these shapes, select them all, and there's this little floating taskbar or toolbar here at the bottom. Here we can just choose delete. And going back to the tool, once again, I'm going to reduce this down. Let's just say maybe even go down to 4 or 5. So yeah, I want it to be fast. For me, that's more important. Now I'm going to reduce the size. Let me see. Yeah, something like that looks good. And I am also going to change the color that I'm drawing with. Now the good news is that because I already had the swatches set up on the desktop version of this file, they also been transferred here to the cloud version of the document. So we already have these colors. And for instance, this is the color that I wanted to use for the hair, beard, and mustache and eyebrows. So I already have that one selected. And let's just see how it looks. Yeah, works well. Now let's start with the mustache. I'm just going to zoom a little bit closer here. And I'm going to start drawing over this. And let's try to close it off here. And the good thing is that if you keep drawing over with the same tool, in this case it's the blob brush, it's automatically going to join them together. So this is going to end up being a single object. And that is because we are using this setting. So let me just jump back here. Again, from the brush settings, the merge brush strokes is an option that's on by default, and you should definitely keep that on.